work and learn, share tips and tricks and whatnot. And what's really great is when somebody like Blackmagic will come and present, whatever their products are, the new products. And what's nice here is, unlike an NAB or something where you can't really get your questions answered, it's a lot more interactive here. Paul will find out how terrible you guys are tonight.
I'm ready.
Sometimes. Anyways, AlphaDogs, we're primarily a finishing house. We also have offline rental rooms available. We do finishing in Resolve and Symphony and Premiere, unfortunately. But we handle it. It doesn't matter what you've started in, we take care of it. So generally, if it's started in Avid, we might finish in Avid, but anything else, we try to push through to Resolve. And that's pretty much it for AlphaDogs and Editor's Lounge. And there you go. Thank you for coming. Enjoy Paul. I'm going to close the door and we can watch this. You want to come in or not? There's more seats. Squeeze on back.
In case of a water landing. All right.
Oh, sorry.
So I'm Paul with Blackmagic, and just going to start with a little 1-minute overview video of what we've got going on in DaVinci Resolve. There's no gratuitous applause?
Yeah, time code.
Okay, so those of you that have seen me demo before know that I like the gratuitous applause. All right, so we're all going to be friends for the next 40 minutes. So how many people in here are already using DaVinci Resolve? Wow. For editing or for color? Color. That's editing. Excellent. All right. And I'm sure we have a mixture of Media Composer and Premiere and Final Cut folks in here. Yes? Yes. Okay.
How many Final Cut?
Yeah, Final Cut.
7 or
7 or 10?
10.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is my portion of the demo, there's 3 rooms. I'm doing a general overview of all the new stuff in DaVinci Resolve 15. So I'm going to cover a lot of the Fusion stuff, visual effects, show you how we've integrated Fusion into Resolve. I'll cover a lot of the editing and a lot of the new audio color features as well. Mary is in one of the other rooms. She's doing a deep dive on audio, and Sean is in the 3rd room, and he's doing a deep dive on editing. So when we get done with this session, if you want to go deeper into any one of those topics, you can check out those rooms. So I'm going to just jump in and start by saying, at NAB, we introduced DaVinci Resolve 15. It's currently a public beta, and the big news for us this year is we have not only added a ton of new stuff, but we've actually picked up the pace even more. We are developing and innovating at an incredible pace right now. We have integrated Fusion visual effects and motion graphics into DaVinci Resolve. It was a separate application. It's been used in feature film and television for years and years and years. And that's now built into DaVinci Resolve, so I'm going to show you that first. We've added a whole slew of new Fairlight audio features, so you really get now a true digital audio workstation level solution right inside DaVinci Resolve. And then probably about 100, maybe a few more features that editors and colorists have specifically been asking us for over the last year. So we've really spent a lot of time out here in LA and in the community abroad to get feedback to find out, all right, if you're not yet cutting in DaVinci Resolve, what is it that we need to do to get you to take a look and to cut your shows in Resolve? And with colorists as well, it's, there are other competing color solutions out there, and we said, okay, what do you need? What do you need us to do? So we're trying to be really interactive and responsive to the community's needs. So a lot of the development effort is more than just bright new shiny objects. It's about really doing the things that you guys have asked for. So I'm going to jump in. And we'll start with Fusion. How many people do visual effects already?
What level?
2? 3?
You mean
You're
dedicated or
like-
any visual effect?
Well, I guess any.
Oh, that's all of them, probably.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, that's what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Okay. So, so to add visual effects to a shot, all you do is you scrub the playhead to the shot you want. It's over that shot. And at the bottom, let me turn my names on here. So, can you see that over this monitor? The page is at the bottom of Resolve. For those of you that used it, there's a new page in between the edit color page, and it's called Fusion. So when I click on the Fusion page, it takes me to Fusion, and I'm on that same clip and that same frame that I was on the edit page. And the Fusion interface, just like all of the other pages in Resolve, has buttons at the top that let you turn different parts of the user interface on and off. So shouldn't be, that much of a surprise. There's an effects library which gives you access to over 250 dedicated tools for compositing 2D, 3D work, particles, animations, transformations, all that kind of stuff. There's 2 viewers at the top, so if I press the 1 key, the image is displayed in the left viewer. If I press the 2 key, it's displayed in the right viewer. Okay, and then there's a toolbar with commonly used tools in the middle, and the inspector at the right, which is where we adjust all of our settings. So not completely foreign for those of you that have worked in Resolve. The big new thing here is in the middle, which is the node tree or the node graph. And this is how we construct effects in DaVinci Resolve using Fusion. We use nodes instead of layers. And nodes you can think of like building blocks. You just basically take these blocks or modules and you connect them together to create effects. So for example, if I go and I grab my grid warp, I can just drop my grid warp right in between the media in and media out. I should probably explain. Media in is what's coming in from the edit page on the left. Media out on the right is what's going back out to the edit page. So all of our effects get built between the media in and the media out node. So I've added the grid warp. When I click on that, you can use the on-screen controls, and we're just going to be really silly here, or you can use the inspector. And then you just switch back to the edit page, and there it is on the timeline on the edit page. So depending on the speed of your system and the kind of effects you're doing, you may have to wait for a second or two for it to cache. But you'll see that there's a bunch of real-time stuff as well. So I can go back here and I can just play my really gross-looking war. But that's how it works. You just add stuff in between the media in and media out. And there are a lot of benefits to working this way as opposed to working with layers that I'll go over as we build some of the demos. So let me do something a little more serious. In this particular shot, and you know what, we're going to just start back here. So this is a short film called Hyperlight. This lady, I don't remember her character name, terrible, I should know it, is floating in space in her space pod, and she wakes up. She doesn't know why her pod got ejected from the ship, and she's a little distressed at the moment. So we are going to composite some computer graphics on top of her visor or screen in her space pod. So just a simple 2D composite layering objects. So I'm going to go to my media pool. My media pool is the same as it is in the rest of DaVinci Resolve. You now have it on the color page as well. It just gives you access to all of your media in your project. So here we're going to grab the computer graphics that we want. We have an animation, and I'm going to press the 1 key to show it in the viewer there. To combine images, you basically use this tool in the middle, which is called a merge tool. It's the most popular tool you're going to use in Fusion, and it simply composites one image on top of another. So when I connect these together, you see the graphics are on top of her head. Now, if we wanted to make this a little more realistic, I could add additional things in between the graphics and the merge. So maybe I want to blur it out a little bit. I can select the blur. I can go and change the type of blur, the size, the amount of the blur. So you can see we're basically constructing things and building a flowchart for the image processing. So for those of you that have never worked with nodes before, I actually think it's pretty approachable, and it's not nearly as scary as it sometimes looks. So let's try and add a little more realism to this. I'm going to use the paint tools, and now you've got awesome paint tools here in DaVinci Resolve with the addition of Fusion. So we're going to use paint to just paint on some reflections and stuff so that it looks a little more, adds a little more dimension to the shot. So I'm adding a background, and I'm adding the paint tool, and I need the background because I'm going to use that. That's what I'm painting on. And then I'm just going to merge that background and paint over the composite we've already done. And I'm just connecting it all together. Really simple. With the paint tool selected, you can see its controls on the right. And I've got brush controls here. I can adjust the shape, the size, all kinds of different things for the stroke. I also have different types of strokes that I can use up here. So you can see that I've got multi-strokes, regular strokes, I've got shapes, I can do occlusion, I can merge strokes together. In this case, I'm just gonna hold down the command key and make my brush larger, and then we're just gonna brush on a couple of strokes. There's a couple of strokes, and that's it. So now what I can do is, if you want, you can go to the modifiers. You have total control over the entire stroke. You can change color, their vector, you can animate them, do anything you want with them. For our purposes though, I'm just gonna go back to the merge tool, and I'm gonna change the blend mode and just make it an overlay. We're gonna just blend that, we can blend that up and down as much or as little as we want. You can see pretty quickly how the image flows. So the image comes in at the left in the media in node. We add the graphics, blur it, merge it on top. We add the paint, merge it on top, and then we go back out to the edit page there on the right. Everybody with me so far?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Nobody sleeping yet?
Sorry to disturb.
All right, there will be a test.
Great.
All right, so here's our visual effect now in our shot. So pretty painless. So here's another shot. This is a typical green screen shot that you'll get. I'm sure you've seen them many times before. This one has 2 layers. So as opposed to the first shot, which was a single layer, I now have 2 layers to work with. I could work with them independently if I'd like, or I could combine them into what we call a fusion clip. When I do that and go to Fusion, you'll see that it automatically creates the merged tree for me. So I've got my background plate, which is my planet, merged with my green screen plate using this merge tool here. So all I have to do is go to my effects library, and I'm going to go to my matte tools, and I'm going to pick a keyer. We've got a bunch of different keyers. Delta keyer, I think, is probably the best one in the toolbox. And with the Delta keyer selected, I'm just going to go and get my eyedropper, and I need to be viewing that. Sorry. So one of the things you'll see me do is I'm clicking on these little, I'm using the 1 and 2 keys, which is the equivalent of clicking these little dots here, which I can't hit because I made my mouse too big. Okay, but if you hit the 1 key, it'll show up in the left, and the little left dot is lit. If you hit the 2 key, the the right dot is lit.
Yeah, but how come your green screen didn't work yet?
Because I need to click the eyedropper, and I need to go here, and I need to, why is my green screen not working? That's a really good question. It's demo magic, my friends, is why it's not working. All right. All right, we're going for it.
Spectrograph is looking pretty good right now.
It's not grabbing the color.
It's not grabbing the colors.
Yeah, you have to manually do it.
It's only because we're all watching.
It's only because you're all watching. Okay, there we go, look at that. So apparently the eyedropper is misbehaving at the moment, but I can do that. I can go look at my mat. We've got a bunch of cleanup tools for the mat, so you can really dial this in, and if I had selected a closer color, I'd probably be doing a better job. But that's
Pretty good.
there you go. Look at that. So there's my green screen. Go back to the edit page. This one's a real-time effect.
Just 2 hours ago.
Real time.
So didn't have to render that one.
Yeah, that's nice.
That's
So-
very nice, yeah.
So of course, you know, I did it really quickly, but I would go in and I'd finesse these edges to make sure that this was really as clean as it could be. And we'd probably also do a little bit of tracking so that the background was attached to, you know, to the camera, matched the camera movement in the shot. But that's really how quick and easy it is to do a green screen now that we've got Fusion built in. So other things that we can do, we've got great titling with Fusion now. So feature film quality titling, finishing quality for whether you're doing HD, 4K, DCI, Ultra HD, whatever. So we're going to add a title sequence to this shot. So I'm going to go to the Fusion page, and we're going to work in 3D now. So here is our shot, and we are going to have an animated title come onto the screen right about here, right after the pod passes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this little yellow bar on the left, and this is just the looping region for what we're doing in Fusion. All right. So So let's get started with this. The first thing we need to do is we're going to work in 3D for this. We're going to basically do a 3D title. So when you're working in 3D, you need to put your 2D image onto an object. And in this case, I'm just going to put it onto an image plane. So if I just back this out a little bit, you can see now I've put my video onto an image plane, and if we back out, you can see that I can play that. And it's just going to keep looping while we're working. All right, so I've got my image plane. Now we're going to add some text. So I'm going to go and grab my text tool. We're going to put the text up here. You can see there's my 3D text. To combine these, just like I used a merge for the first example, or the first two examples, we're going to use a merge for this example as well. This one is a little different. It's called a merge 3D. And the only difference is really the merge 3D lets you combine as many assets into a single scene as you want, whereas the regular 2D merge is just a foreground and a background. So I've now added my text to my scene here, so you can see the text is floating in front of the video. All right, so with the text selected, I can go in here and we're just going to quickly type the name of our movie, set the font. Now this is kind of standard stuff that you would do in any application. We're going to set the color, we'll do this yellow, and we'll adjust the size. Yeah, that's long. And maybe do some tracking, get it where we want. And you can see that this is, we're in the 3D space, but the text is still 2D. So we can extrude that to actually give it some depth. So I'm going to go to my extrusion controls, give it some depth. We'll add a little bevel as well. You can see now we've got our beveled text in both views. All right, so let's do some animation. We've got our text set up. We'll animate the tracking, which is the character spacing, this right here. So as I move that slider, we're going to animate that. So I'm going to go to maybe about frame, I don't know, 135, and we're going to just click the keyframe button, and we're going to say 1.5 is where we want it to end. And then back here around frame 88, we're going to have it start nice and wide. All right, so now you're going to see that playing back. So that's animating. Very easy. It's very straightforward, very much like the edit page or the color page. You just set a keyframe, change a parameter, move the playhead, set them up. We can also animate individual characters. So I can use a follower. Oops, what do I do here? That's weird. All right, I'm having the best luck tonight. All right, now it's really being weird. All right, you know what? The best thing to do at this time. It's just gonna be
Beta.
That's okay, it happens.
You know,
It happens. So it's nice to know it doesn't just happen to us.
you know. The good thing, this gives me an opportunity to tell you about our live save feature. So we've lost nothing.
That's good.
If I had it on.
Was it on?
Apparently not. Okay, here we go. This will be, I will do this very quickly, then I'm sorry. All right, we're just going to grab our image plane, put that there, that. Okay, there's that. Feel free to shout out questions while I'm doing this.
Did you have to set your second keyframe, or did that just automatically set itself once you'd moved your?
It automatically sets it. Once you move the playhead and change the parameter again,
Okay.
it automatically sets the keyframe. All right, so here we are, text. We need to view that on the right. So you can, one of the cool things about nodes and having these viewers is I can view something, I can view one node while changing the parameters in another, so I can see how things are affecting and changing other objects in my project as I'm working. All right, here we go. Text that. Take that down. And then I think we are going to grab my video. I've made the mouse larger so you can all see it, but it's messing me up a bit, so I apologize. Okay, so tracking, we are going to say starts at 4, and then about frame 135. We're just going to slide that or change the volume, the value back down to 1.5. And we did our extrusion. That, that. All right, great. Now, oh, did Did somebody say save? Okay. Here we go. All right, so we can animate individual characters. So I can add something called a follower. The follower lets me define a delay in time between the animation of each character, and then I can go and I can set keyframes for different parameters, so all the stuff that you saw me doing before. In this case, I'm going to do the Z position, so I want them to all land on where they are right now at frame 135, and then back at the beginning where we started our tracking animation, I'm just going to move them back behind the camera, so I'm going to type a value of 10 to offset them in Z space. So now you can see, if I play back, that it is animating them in one at a time, one character at a time. And I think
This is
that
why God invented graphic artists.
right.
Yeah.
We're all gonna be graphic artists soon. Okay, I'm gonna
No.
just, no, oh my gosh. Oh, come on. All right, so let's zoom out a little so you can see how that's going. So that's going left to right. We can go and we can change the order from inside to out or outside to in or whatever you want, and you can see that as I do that, it updates. All right, so that's basic text 3D. Let's add some particles. I'm gonna grab a particle emitter.
Is this 1080 or a 4K project?
That's a very good question. And this is a 2048 by 858, so it's
So
2K.
2K,
It's
okay.
2K 239
In real time.
in real time, yes.
And that's an iMac.
This is a 5K iMac,
Okay.
so this is not even the new iMac Pro. And actually, Fusion is really RAM hungry and resource intensive, so the more cores and processors you can throw at it and the more RAM you can throw at it, the faster it will be. So you can see my performance is not too bad on this iMac right here. On the iMac Pro, which we were using at NAB with the 18 cores, it just flies.
What about an old Mac Pro?
Yeah,
Maybe-
not so much.
Maybe like.
So much?
Not so much?
Not so
What if you maxed out the RAM, like 124 RAM? Would that help? Is it more RAM or is it more GPU? What do you need?
It's both. Resolve in general is very resource intensive. Fusion is even more so. We will use as many CPUs and cores as you can throw at it, and we will use, if you have Studio, as many GPUs, I think up to 6 on the Mac, as you can throw at it. So, I assume you're talking about the cheese grater?
Yeah, the old cheese graters,
Yeah.
yeah. Like a 5.1, 12 core or something like that.
I would try it. I don't know. I honestly haven't used it, but
Alright.
give it a shot. And let me know. I'd be curious actually, because I think Apple is hoping that you're all going to buy new computers soon.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, a year from now.
Is Fusion included with the free version in Resolve or not?
Fusion is included with the free version of Resolve. So everything I've shown you so far is included in the free version, and there are going to be some things I will show you. I'll explain the differences in the versions at the end. So I have a particle emitter and a particle renderer. Now the particle emitter, oh, it's 720 already. I got to move faster. Okay, so you have an emitter and a renderer, the thing that makes the particles and then the thing that draws the particles. The reason why they're separate is because sometimes you might want to put things in between them, like disturbance or blurs or gravity or wind or something that's going to change the way the particles behave. Right? So in this case, I have thankfully preset a lot of the stuff for my particles, so you don't have to watch me do all of it. But the big thing here is I'm going to just crank up the velocity, and you can see that the particles start streaming out there on the right. So let me just zoom in a little bit so you can see that. And then we're going to change the Z angle so they start coming toward the camera. Maybe give them a little variance. All right, so you can see my particles are now flowing, but all they are little white dots, so I have to style them. So here you can set the style, and we're going to use blob. Blob is, it can be anything. It can be an image, it can be a bitmap. The blob is built in, it's just a little fuzzy ball. We're going to set it to be yellow to sort of match our text. All right, and now you can see those are all coming at me. Now you can emit the particles from anything. Right now they're coming from a sphere in the center of the scene. They can be coming from a cube, so if I make this really big, you can see, again, in 3D, everything's working in this 3D environment together. In this case, we're going to use a mesh, and a mesh can be any piece of geometry. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell it to use the text as our particle emitter mesh. So now you're going to see the particles coming out of the text. So let me just turn that to sort of an overhead view here so you can see that the particles are coming out of the text. Now this is an example of why nodes are better than working with layers. In a layer-based effects application, you're constantly opening and closing, twiddling things open and closed, trying to find the filters and the effects that you're working with. In a node-based application, I can actually use the text, one object, multiple times. So in this example, I'm merging the text over the background, but I'm also using the text as the source for my particles. So I've got it piped into two different things at once. I don't have to copy and paste this into another layer, so I'm not dealing with multiple copies of the same asset. I'm dealing with one copy, so if I change it in one place, it changes in all places. So it's a lot more efficient and a lot easier to work with. And again, just think of it like a flow chart. It's pretty straightforward. So we've got our particles going. I'm gonna add a light, and I'm just gonna plug that in here to my 3D scene. Now the light affects obviously all the objects, so I'm gonna just pull this back. Let me just frame that up a little bit so you can see it. All right, and now when I move my light, you can see that it's very interactive on my iMac here, that everything's still playing in real time. I can go in, I can change the color of my light, change the color of my spotlight. There we go, I gotta change it. Whoop. So there we go, changing the color. So when you're done with your creation, which is really stunningly beautiful. Right?
I have one question before you're.
Go ahead.
Can you move the camera inside of all of that?
Yes, so it's a full 3D application. You can import 3D models, objects, you can render, texture, shade, light them all here. There's a 3D camera. You can do all of that. I have opted to not use a camera for this example because I don't need one.
Stuff,
and for the purposes of the demo, it's simpler without it. The last step here is we're in 3D. In order to get this back out to the edit page, it has to be 2D. So we add a render node, and then we send it to the media out. So then we get that on the edit page. So if I go to the edit page, you can see the output there. Now, one of the really cool things about having Fusion in the app is typical workflows. You would take a shot, you'd go out to a visual effects app or a motion graphics app, you'd do your work, you'd render it out, you'd re-import it here, and then you'd move on to your next shot. Well, because Fusion's built in, you have access to every single shot in your timeline right here. So you could just click around and be working on any shot at any time that you want. You also get access to every version of every shot. So as you iterate and do your effects, you can load and review multiple older or newer versions. So for example, I'm gonna load the finished version of this title composition, which is a little more involved than what I made. And then when we go back to, let me just park on a frame.
And
so
how do
can
you
see.
do that, by the way?
I just right-clicked on it, and I said load composition. So I can create a new composition right now. If I select create a new composition down there, it'll create a new composition based on the one I'm currently on. So then I can keep modifying and working on it, and I'll have a new version. And then you just switch between them. So now you've got every version of every VFX shot in your editing and color application. So when you go back to the edit page, you can see it there. Now we're not going to wait for this to render because that will take a little time, so I'll play you the finished version. But basically you see our space pod flies by and our title's flying.
How long does that take to render?
It really depends on the speed of your system. On this machine, it'd probably take about 4 minutes. All right, so let's move on to some of the editing and color stuff so that we can show you some of that. So if you are, if you're an editor, and lots of you are, a lot of times people work with the same templates, the same set of bins from project to project or episode to episode. So if you're like that, you can actually create a blank, empty set of folders. Here I have camera A, B, and C, day 1, 2, and 3, all in a folder called dailies. You can basically create a template for your bins, switch to Resolve, and then just drag them in. And I should drag them into the right place. Just drag them in, and there they come. So if you're an assistant editor, this just saved you probably an hour. So all of the clips just come in.
The clips or
I'm sorry, the
bins?
folders. The bins come in so that you can populate them. And then once you've got your bins in, you can manually sort and do anything you want with your bins. We have on the media page here is where I would recommend doing it. The media page shows you everything on your drives at the top and then everything in your project at the bottom. So it's just a bigger workspace for you to work in. You see a smaller version of that here on the left side of the edit page. You can create smart bins that are metadata based, so you can organize all of your clips automatically based on metadata like scene, shot, take information, or sling information. You can do all your syncing, all of that stuff. All right, let's
If you had media in those folders, when you drag them over, would the media come into your media pool as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So what used to, with DaVinci Resolve, prior to DaVinci Resolve 15, if you dragged an empty folder in, it wouldn't bring empty folders that are in the empty, like you couldn't have empty things. They all had to have something in them. Now you can just bring them in and we'll preserve the bin hierarchy, with or without media. All right, so a couple of important, but not as exciting things. Large projects now load much faster because we give you the option to load timelines and color grades when you need them as opposed to at the opening of a project. So if you open a project with 100 timelines and 10,000 clips, we don't load all of them when you double click to launch that project. We only load them as you need them. So large projects open much faster. Live saving, I mentioned earlier, this saves my butt in case we crash. Project backups, it's like having time machine for your projects now. You can set backups every few minutes, every few hours, every few days, and then just browse between the older versions and recall them at any time. We've also greatly improved keyboard mapping, so now you can map your keyboard on a page-by-page basis in the app. So you might have a Media Composer key set on the edit page, and you might have a Pro Tools preset on the Fairlight page, or something like that. So now you can set keyboard shortcuts on a page-by-page basis in the application, which is really very cool. All right.
Are there presets in there, or do you have to do?
There are
individual
presets. There's presets for Final Cut 10, for Premiere Pro, and for Media Composer. There is not a Final Cut 7 keyboard set because most of our commands map pretty close to the Final Cut 7 already. All right. So the other thing that we've added are stacked and tabbed timelines. So I can go in and I can just add new timelines here. So I can do scene 1, scene 4. And you can grab these tabs. You can reorder them in any order that you want. You can also stack them. So if I click the stack button, I can see 2 timelines on top of each other. If I have a higher res monitor, I can see 3 timelines. You can copy, paste, do 3-point edits, drag and drop between timelines. The active timeline that you're seeing in the viewer will have the red bar. So this is on one of those other systems. This is called pancake editing, I think the term is. So stacked and tabbed timelines are super cool in DaVinci Resolve 15.
Can you gang them together?
No, but that's an excellent feature request, and glad we're still in beta, so we can maybe think about doing that. Okay, so let's see. Annotations are super easy. We have annotations, and I'm moving really fast because there's a bunch of stuff I want to cover that we're going to run out of time if I don't. So I can leave annotations, markers with duration. If I'm working in a collaborative environment where we have multiple people working on the same project at the same time, we've got built-in secure chat, bin and timeline locking. They see the annotations. They can be used as tasks, so they know exactly what they have to do. This even works if you're not in a collaborative environment where you're just sending projects back and forth. You can email the project files back and forth. Okay.
What happens if you export it like that? Would that disappear?
Yeah, that does not render out.
Okay.
Yeah, that does not render out. And you can shut that off right here, show marker overlays. There's also a new button here to bypass color grades. So if you've got a lot of GPU intensive or processor intensive grades and effects on it, you can just bypass all of that so that your editing is super fast. All right, we've done a bunch of work here, just little things for editors. For example, I can convert my markers to an in and out point, which is just convenient. I can then create a subclip simply by dragging that back into my bin. So now I've got a subclip, and you can see now I've only got the region that was marked. Okay, if I go and I edit that into the timeline here, as you would expect with a subclip, I can't make it any longer or shorter. So what if you get into a situation where you're like, God, I wish I had an extra 2 seconds on that? Well, instead of having to go back to the source and recreate a new subclip, you can edit the subclip, and you can just say, okay, I want that to be, to 4202, and now I've got another 2 seconds that I can edit with. So really, really great subclip features here. Titles have gotten a huge upgrade in DaVinci Resolve 15. So let me just look at scene 3, I think is what it is. Yeah. So if I look in the effects library, we now have Text Plus, which is, as you'll see in a second, this is the Fusion text generator that I was showing you earlier when we were on the Fusion page. So now you literally have feature film quality titling in Resolve 15 right on the edit page. We're also giving you probably 3 or 4 dozen 2D and 3D title templates. So these are Fusion templates that I can just drag on, and I can use them on the edit page, and I can just go here and type the name of the actor and change the color. I can even go around and move this if I want to, and put it right there. And then the first time you play through these, it does a little quick RAM cache, and then it'll be real time the second time through. So instant animated titles. I've got some titles just to show you some of the 40 or so that we've got. So, come on. So lower thirds, you can change all the fonts, all the colors. We're also giving you the Fusion composition so you can see how we created them and build your own. We've got 2D and 3D elements here. You can change and customize all of this stuff. What? Wait, you're gonna love the next one. So the point is, you know, there's some really useful ones, of course, but there's also some kind of fun and cheesy ones. But the idea is to really just give you projects that you can see, like how did you make that blur or that glow or whatever, and then you can deconstruct it and build your own. So that's titles. We also have added subtitles, and subtitling is real easy. All I do is go to my media page again. Let's see, import file. Okay, so I'm going to go out to my documents folder, and I'm going to get the subtitle. So here's an SRT. It's a subtitle file. I can actually, and I can just drag it in right here, right onto the timeline. And it knows the time code, so all I do is line up the first one, and they all go into the right place.
8 are my corner tools.
Stay put. So if your edit wasn't locked and you need to adjust them, you can just simply move them like anything else. You can also double click and you get the subtitle track here where you can go through them. And he said they were stowed, so you can edit the text. You can also adjust the style for all of them, so I can change the color for them, any attribute. You know, you see me style text already with other things. It works exactly the same way. All right, delete all gaps command. We've added a ton of stuff for editors. I'm moving even faster because we only have a few minutes left, so I don't have time to show you everything. But there's a document on our website that's 280 pages that covers all of the new features in detail. So it's that big. You know. So color. Let's look at color for a little bit, and I'm just going to switch to a color timeline. All right. So in the color page, we have done a lot of work to just make things a lot easier for colors. So for example, if I do a grade on this clip, and I'm going to do something really obvious, I'm just going to pull that down. I can create a shared grade. So now you see that says shared node 4 there. If I go to this clip and I copy and paste the grade onto that clip, you now see that says shared node as well. Now these are locked by default so that you don't accidentally change them. But now what happens is when I change one, they both change. So if you've got everything from, you know, you're cutting back and forth between A and B cameras, it's now super easy to lock those grades together. You can also create arbitrary groups. You can create timeline grades, group grades, clip grades, and locked grades now. So that's a really, really handy feature.
How easy is it to match shots?
Well, we do have some auto shot matching tools, and it really, I think that's a colorist skill question. The software can do it just fine. It's the operator. There is some auto matching tools. So for example, if I wanted to say, make this one look like that one, I could say, let's see, where's it? Shot match to this clip, and it'll try to do it, and you can see it did not do a very good job because I'm correcting on top of a correction. But
that's why I still have a job.
Yeah, exactly. That's why you still have a job. Congratulations. Thank you. Qualifiers have also gotten a lot better to use in Resolve. So if I wanted to select this orange, I've got that there. Previously, if you wanted to adjust the hue, saturation, or luminance, you'd have to type values in all those little boxes there underneath the strips. Now with DaVinci Resolve 15, you can just grab right here, and you can just, super easy, just drag with the mouse instead of having to type all the numbers in. We've also added a bunch of new matte finesse tools to denoise and clean blacks and whites and shrink and grow mattes and stuff like that. So just a lot cleaner in that particular area. We also have added a LUT gallery. I can't believe I almost forgot to tell you about that. So let me go here. So we've got a bunch of LUTs that are built in, and as you scrub over a LUT, it automatically previews it on the clip. So I can go and I can preview some film looks. And you can see how some of them are pretty subtle, but some of them are not. So that's the new LUT browser. We also have multiple playheads, so you can park multiple playheads on the timeline and jump back and forth between them to reference shots. So lots of great little things for colorists. We've also got a new node graph tool, so the Fusion node graph and the color node graph are much more similar now. And we've added a ton of effects. Oh, I shouldn't say a ton. We've added a bunch of new effects. So for example, we previously had a product called Revival, which was for restoration. We've added some of those features back into Resolve as plugin effects. So you've got automatic dirt removal, dead pixel fixer, dust busting. There's a patch replacer I'm going to show you in a second. We've also added some new light effects, so some aperture diffraction stuff. So you can see that is there's aperture diffraction effects are there. We've got lens reflections as well, so if I add a lens reflection, that'll show up here on the right. That's the one. And these are all pretty much real time. It just depends on what you're doing. The patch replacer is kind of my favorite because it allows us to clone an area of the image and replace it. So this is great for blemish removal, dirt, dust sort of stuff as well. Or you can use it to clone. And we use smart fill technology, so we're kind of, I don't want to say it's not AI, but it's just it's intelligent fill. So I can blend in my fill with the background so that it looks just right.
Will that then automatically track?
It won't automatically track, but I can go in and track that pretty easily just by going and setting an effects tracker. And I've got a point on there already, and I just track that forward. And now you can see it's a little bit off, but I can go and I can adjust that, of course. But for the most part, in about, a second or two, you saw me clone the spaceships, and others too, and it looks pretty good. All right, so that is a very, very fast tear through some of the features. I wanted to leave time so that I could answer your questions.
Cool.
So please, let's spend the last 10 minutes or so answering questions. I'm happy to show you whatever you ask for if I can.
First question is, since Resolve doesn't really render out stuff, but when you were building something in Fusion that needs to kind of be rendered to work with it, is that treated differently, the Fusion comps?
No, we've had caching in, we call it caching and not rendering because people think rendering is a dirty word. So we've always had caching in Resolve, and it's basically in the preferences you set up the location of your cache directory, and it basically renders files to disk just like any other app does. If you can't play it in real time, you'll see on the timeline, you'll see the little blue or red bars. Of course, we're not seeing, okay, like this one. So the blue means we've already cached it to disk. The red means we haven't yet. The mouse is, when your mouse is idle for a couple of seconds, it just does whatever it can that's closest to the playhead.
It automatically renders, is what you're saying, or caches?
Yes. So, and you can set the offset. So I have it set to 2 seconds. You can change your preference to wait 10 or 15 seconds or however long.
Will it background cache?
No, we'll not do it in the background because we assume when you're doing editing in color, you want the responsiveness, especially if you're trimming. Yes.
In 14, it looks like that, where the clips are really thick. Is there a way to, because when you're editing, you want to see as much as you can. In Avid, yeah, can you do it with the audio as well?
Audio, that's as small as the audio will get. Yeah. But that's a good feature request. It's been on my list for
Yeah, it'd be nice if the
couple
audio
weeks.
was as thin as the video. That way you can see as many layers as
I was
possible.
thinking 24 layers.
I hear you, yes.
What's the difference between the free version and the expensive version?
Oh, the expensive, there is no expensive version. So DaVinci Resolve Studio is $299 and it costs less than most of your plugins, all right? It also works with OpenFX plugins if I didn't say that earlier. So the difference is the free version is limited to Ultra HD resolution. to outputting Ultra HD. You can bring in assets, you can work with media that's higher than Ultra HD, which is 3840 by 2160, but you just can't output anything higher than Ultra HD. It is missing some of the resolve effects, so like the dust removal stuff. It's missing the temporal and spatial noise reduction, which has been greatly improved. Stabilization actually is included in both versions, but it's 10 times faster in version 15 than it was in 14. DaVinci Resolve Studio, the paid version, also includes stereoscopic 3D tools, so you can work in stereo, and all the collaborative stuff. So if you're working with multiple users and you want to share projects and do bin locking and have secure chat and all that stuff, you need that. But for the most part, the free version will do just about everything that most people want. It really comes down to a lot of the filter effects and plugin sort of things.
What about the predictive analytics?
Predictive analytics.
The area where you copied the spacecraft and then it knew how to.
Oh, so that is a Resolve effect. It's a plugin. It's one of our own plugins, and that is only in the studio version.
All right.
Yeah.
You have different output settings. I think I saw you got output to Netflix now.
Yes. So. So here you have output presets that you can make. You see that this is now called IMF. You may have seen at NAB it was called
Netflix?
Yeah. So we're in conversations with them about that now. So now it's IMF. You can also, and you've always been able to do this, you can create your own render or output settings and then save them as a preset so they appear in that little bar at the top, so you have quick access to that. So that's
So we
new.
can do it and call it Netflix.
You can call it whatever you want.
I wasn't there. I wasn't at any rate, so the joke about Netflix, is that
So-
their render settings or something?
minute.
So see how the
Logo.
icon says IMF?
Right.
It was the Netflix logo.
Yeah.
And that's because it's set to what they want?
Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah. So just like we have, a YouTube and a Vimeo preset, we didn't ask YouTube or Vimeo, I don't think, about their icons. They never complained. I think it's just one of those things, sort of like the Final Cut icon up there, and
What about, I mean, I understood that even like in 12 or something, they could output DCPs or something?
Yes, so we include Easy DCP.
Right.
So you can do a basic DCP output. You do have to buy a license to get full control over DCP, and then you enter the license code into Resolve and all the
And that's
rest of the.
different from like the Studio $300 version, or does
It's the
that
same in
include
both. Same in both. So you have to, if you want more than Easy DCP, you have to pay them for it.
Oh, so it's an external.
Yeah, they're an external vendor, and then you enter their activation code into our software, and it turns on the features.
When you brought the SRT, can you bring ITTs also and VTTs or just SRTs?
I want to say the answer is going to be yes. It's not right now. It's just SRT right now. When you export, actually, and I don't remember where it is, subtitle settings, you can export your subtitles as a separate file, burn it in, or as embedded captions in SRT or VTT formats.
Okay.
So I know we've got the export there. I'm not sure about the import yet, but I'm sure it's coming if it's not in there now.
How do you export just the subtitle file with no video or audio? I was trying that earlier today and I couldn't turn off the video
You should
and
be able to
audio.
just turn off.
We would just keep turning back on one of them when I selected the other one.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
That's a bug that we should report.
Yeah.
Wasn't me.
That shouldn't work like that, of course. So, have you posted that bug, or?
No, I just, right before I left, I discovered
Okay.
that and
So-
figured it was me.
If anybody is using the beta, please, we have a beta feedback form on our website. Definitely, if you find little things like that, let us know about them so we can squash them as quickly as possible. The engineering team is awesome. They're very responsive. Even if they don't get back to you personally, I guarantee they're looking at everything that goes up on the form. So, yeah.
Are you able to compress while you're exporting? Because I've had to use a separate program to compress it.
Yeah, of course. So you can go in here and you can use one of the presets or create custom. You can do, we've got QuickTime, all this settings here, H.264. You can do network optimized. You can also do single or multipass, change your encoding profile. So yeah, you can do all of your compression right here if you want.
I was hoping I can.
How does that compare, say, to like a dedicated, compression program like Encoder or something like that? I mean, is it?
I don't know.
Can you do multiple encodes at the same time? Can you spit out like a high def and a base 264?
So what you can do is you can add to, let me just select one of these here, and I'll just add to render. Render path is not accessible. I have to tell it where to render to, so let's just say, this is where you should always render, your desktop. So I can add that to the render queue, then I can go and I can check and do another setting. I can just stack these things up, and when I click start render, you can go have lunch and it'll just it'll just burn through all of them sequentially.
This runs on both PC and Mac?
Windows, Linux, and Mac.
Gotcha. And can you do a ProRes output on a PC?
You cannot. That's an Apple licensing thing.
What hardware is required for the collaborative workflow?
So any networked systems with shared storage, you actually don't even have to have shared storage. As long as you have the same exact media and file paths on both systems, you can use the collaborative stuff. One of the machines can act as a server, and the other can be just a client, or you can have a dedicated server. If you have a machine room or something like that set up, you can have a dedicated server. But the system requirements are not any different for that than they are for standalone. It's just about making sure everybody has access to the media.
Feature request for the secure chat. When
Yes.
you talk to somebody, it's easy to miss that they're trying to get in touch with you. Can you make the button a big ass red button that you cannot ignore?
Yes, that's a great request. Let me ask, do you want an audio ping as well?
Sure. Something, because usually if somebody's trying to reach you, it's pretty critical.
Yeah.
And, they get pissed off when they have to walk across the hall.
Of course they do.
I suggest the sound effect from the old Get Smart, the red phone.
How we doing?
Pretty much.
Is it time?
Yeah.
That goes fast, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.